Sidetrack us, Jason. Let's step out of the White Sands incident. Let's talk about...
What hat do you have there, bro?
Oh, you're talking about this new Turtle merch?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a new era snapback flat brim with with the turtle gray and the turtle logo on the front.
Shout out to turtle.co if
Yep.
you want to get paid for your data and you want to earn some T-coin rewards.
Yeah.
That just snapped onto the system.
Yeah, you got to get those turtle coins.
Start filling out the data packets, help humanity. If you're concerned about climate stability, educational access, corporate and government transparency, the Big Seven, you can go to turtle.co, learn about it, click on Big Seven, and then you can donate your data to help these causes.
Help yourself, help the world.
Yeah, pretty badass. So that's why we love to have them for a sponsor. They aligned with our higher density living concepts, which I want to get into. And I think this is really important for our listeners because no matter where you're at in life, you're a leader.
Right.
If you have children, you're a leader. If you have or any type of relationship, you become a leader. Now, here's the problem that we've had, and we always go back to history to look at things. And I think this lasts here in the United States. Or we can take the UK. Because they chose conservatism here recently, and then the United States chose Biden over Trump. But when you look at this leadership that is out there now, and this is an episode on leadership, and there's this fear-based mentality on all sides, why are people so drawn to, we'll start off this way, why are people so drawn and so accepting of a leader that is not putting love out there, but putting fear?
Love takes patience.
Mm-hmm.
It takes cooperation. And it takes integration. And the reason they don't deal with love-based leadership is the integration part. You have to integrate with that is untrue. You have to integrate with negative aspects. And doing that requires a deep understanding and flexibility with other human beings and the environment and how we interact. Now, a leader who takes a fear-based approach, who works with polarization, doesn't ask you to understand. The leader doesn't look for understanding. It looks to focus on one specific, diluted, false perspective of leadership and what it means to lead through this negative fear-based lens, affording your attention, time, and energy towards this one specific thing for you not to understand. Because having your attention on something untruthful is very easy to get people emotionally charged towards. So, as one of those people who take the path of least resistance, fear is the least resistance for those leaders. Fear is the least resistance for those people who follow those leaders. I don't have to think. I'm not asked to be responsible. So I am told what is wrong, and I am told what I should do. It is not for me to learn. I know that I can just live in this world and ignore the rest. It's a much simpler approach than an approach of leadership based on love, based on understanding, cooperation, unity, and integration.
So a good leader would help, through understanding, would help somebody evolve.
That's the real part, and that requires patience. And it will aggravate some leaders because if they are there in love, wanting to help people evolve, they're just not evolving at the rate you want them to be at. So you have to realize that your aggravation is at the fact that they are not you. And you need to become accepting of that also. But you need to come to them as that leader and learn where they are and help teach them and move them to the next step if they are willing to move to that next phase.
So because you can't impose on someone's free will.
Correct. And for some leaders, it's easy to bark commands and tell people what to do, but that will squander creativity. So you toe a fine line by affording employees or family members their free will and allowing them to learn at their own rate, and understanding that it is a more difficult route to take. It's one that is far more nebulous, but it affords for a stronger, more foundational catalyst of learning for their own evolution. And that stronger foundation will then play back and garner a greater respect for that leader over time.
So okay, because I think this is a great example. So beliefs and biases collectively that people have, and then a leader puts fear to reinforce those, and then from there makes people choose a side, and then to gain power or to get over people's free will. Would you say it's to that extent? They just feed that
or it could
bias
be,
or belief?
Or they're not interested in getting over on people or controlling. They just find that it's for their own personal gain of material wealth.
It's easier,
or ego.
Because it's easier to be fear-based.
It's much easier to be fear-based because it's a single track mind. It doesn't open up the dynamic world of possibility and the abstractness. Fear removes the abstractness. I have a false, narrow frame of reference, which is all I and everybody else should be focusing on, not all the possibility of understanding. And so when you have a world of possibility of understanding as this leader and you take on a creative, creational approach to it, you need to understand the fundamentals of how to deal with such a wide catalyst of possibility. And from that, you have to focus on the very core of the people that you are leading. What is it in their own evolution that you need to meet them at? Something fundamental and foundational for all of them to step off and grow to what they're best to be grown into.
So a leader of a country, we'll get very. I'm saying macro now so that we can understand the philosophy of it, and then we'll get micro. But a leader of a country, so there's speeches that they give when they're on mass media, whether it's television or whatever. Then the message would be what?
Your message should never be one that polarizes or makes someone an enemy or looks to shift blame or point fingers and not create a world of honesty, truth, and transparency. If there is a lack of clarity in the speech, if there is a margin of hate, if there is a margin of marginalization, if there's a margin of pointing and pinning people as the other, that's not the approach that should be taken. You've limited the evolution of your country, the evolution of yourself, and the evolution of other countries in relationship to you that you interact with through the lies in the false, narrow frame of what you would coin as reality. You cannot lead as an example to what the universe and creation has given us so freeingly for us to actually learn from. You distort the perspective of how people should see the world for 5 minutes of fame, glory, and power.
Right.
And from that, when you thought great gains were made in the material sense, you've pushed things backwards in the spiritual and social sense.
I know White Sands Incident talks about that, the material science instead of the spiritual science. But how do you get this message? Because we're talking about communication. How do you get this message across where someone that, and I'm not saying it's judgmental, but somebody that's less involved, how do you create that understanding?
The understanding can never happen from the outside. The method must be Socratic. You must meet them where they are on that bridge. And when you're there, you need to ask them their perception of reality rather than telling them how they should perceive reality. They need to recognize the error in their illusion that they are currently living within. It is not for you to tell them that they are in an illusion and in error.
So this is where great leaders come in, and we've seen this through examples. And Raw talks about this multiple times, because they as a collective understand, leadership, and they even bring up, which I thought was really cool. They even bring up their mistakes when they've led. They've tried to lead, especially here on Earth or whatever. And I don't want to get into that, but what you used the word honest and transparency, and that's something that we don't see now. Whenever I go online and I see leaders or people that are perceiving as leaders, they even have this word thought leaders and stuff like that. It's always those people, and if those people would straighten up and if they would act right, then great things could happen.
You must remember, if you are evolved in a function of thought as a thought leader in your evolution, there was a point in time where you were just as illusioned and in a state of untruth as the individuals which you point a finger at now. That judgment is a judgment upon yourself and a lack of understanding of knowing yourself. Because you do not accept yourself now in the past and how you did learn, you project that onto how others are learning right now. And then through that perspective of thought, you are putting them in a box as less evolved. You are putting it in a hierarchy of your mind. They are perfectly evolved where they are in their own state right now that is best for them. Just as you were when you were at that point and where you are now.
So this is the rub or the dichotomy: to accept somebody's free will and their evolution, but then at the same time move them forward as a leader without going against their free will. That's like a delicate dance.
It's a very delicate dance, and you cannot push people forward. They always come to that decision internally within their mind. But you have to find out the root of the thing that holds them back from moving forward. And you can't tell them what to do, but offer them up questions or ideas around it for which they need to choose to act upon.
That's good, yeah. So I understand this, and I want to stay macro because we're going to get micro here in a second. And the micro is easier, I think, than the macro. When we look to nature, and we look to millions, billions, trillions of years, and we look to creational energy, and exactly the laws that are put there for us, how do you make sure that you're in alignment? Because that's all you can do is be in alignment with them. How can you make sure you're in alignment as a leader? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, do you look at, do you go out in nature more? What do you read about biology? I mean, like, what do you, as a leader, what are some of the steps that you can take to make sure in alignment?
There are many ways to come to the same conclusion.
Right.
You need to recognize the truth or the processes or the experiences that led you to your conclusion. And look to see how that experience and that catalyst can be a metaphor for someone's own path to get to that same point. Because we all take very different paths. But the laws which bring us there are all fundamentally exactly the same. The light and the time in which we actually get to it is our own. Much like it is for everyone else, converging on the same probability of a timeline. There are fundamental things that bring us into that hard, well-entrenched probability of time that continually moves forward. So if you need to figure out as your own check, look at what has worked for you to eradicate untruth in your world. Look at the core of it. What was the fundamental that drove it to this point, that allowed you to think in this light? And then from that, see how that catalyst can be a metaphor for other catalysts. Because the foundational creational energy and law that sits behind it that drives it forward is the same for all.
So let me ask you that then, because you just said, you need to look to those to understand it, and then kind of do some reverse engineering and see how did I get there? Personally, how did you get there? I mean, you're still evolving, of course, but...
Yeah, but how did I get to the point where I'm at?
Yeah.
It's finding that really wonderful combination of knowing who I am deeply, how I find my values that align with other human beings in the universe, and making sure that that frame of reference, which has been tested many times over, the one that works personally for me and the one that works well for creation, gets used in that format. And when I make a decision It has to fall back into that framework. If it sits outside of it, I'm going to do harm to myself, and I will do harm to others over time.
Because we're going to keep going into this, but what sits outside of that framework, I want people to understand that, would be most leaders are basing things off an emotional bias.
Emotional
They're
bias.
just coming up with an answer and saying, go do this.
Fear.
Right.
Anxiety. Negativity.
A belief.
Belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
Control. Hierarchy. Many of those things.
So what you're saying is
commandments.
What you're saying is basically make sure, as a leader, make sure that you're not in that framework of those negative biases and beliefs.
You'll find that your margins of action, the window of reference you should stay in that is most evolutive, sits in direct accordance with natural creational laws. But those laws also allow you to sit outside of that direct path. So when you find something that becomes indirect and outside of the trajectory that is most evolutive, you begin to recognize it. Mm. And through that recognition, you need to bring yourself back onto your path of what truly works, what is truthful to you and is truthful to others. That is how you find that. But fear is not truthful. Fear is not evolutive. Belief is not truth. It is not evolutive. These are the things we need to continue to focus on, or the things that are true to us and true to the universe around us. Anything outside of that drives us off of our path and will make the catalyst for learning to come back onto that path way, way more difficult and severe.
So you used the word light just a second ago, and which reminded me of Raw's teaching, which is the highest vibration is love, light, light, love. Mm-hmm. So we talked about love. I want to get into light as a leader. Because I think there's almost like a dichotomy here, because it's like, do I bring people to the light? Is that my process? Do I ask the question so they see the light?
You take,
you know what I'm saying? Like the
light,
bug.
which is intelligence, it's experience, and you apply that experience into your line of questioning, into your thoughts that come through the listening of interacting with those others that need to evolve also.
Do I have the floodlight that clears the fog?
It's not for you to clear.
Oh, okay.
You have your clarity.
So it's not for me to cut on the light.
It's not for you to cut on the light. It's for you to offer the switch to cut the light on. Is that clear?
Good. Yeah, that's clear. So, so through asking questions, this Socratic way, you're pointing them to the switch for them to have that, because like you said, there's many ways that you can come to a conclusion, which I think is great. So I think this is really important. The light part, I understand the love part, but the light part, I want to understand it a little bit more. And maybe we can get micro here. So let's say I have, let's say I'm your employee, which I am, in Tartle, and I'm having a situation where maybe I'm in perceived darkness. We'll use the word opposite of light. Is darkness. So I'm in perceived darkness, and there's an option for you as a leader to correct me and move me back on the path, which is, like I need to put this employee, this widget in its place. And that's very easy to do and could take a 5-minute conversation. And I could respond well to that and go back on the path, and here I go. So how do you lead me to the switch instead of put me on the path? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. In the context of work, Jason, you understand what the task is, the end goal.
Yes.
Excellent. Do you feel that the direction you're taking with your work will directly accrue towards that end goal?
I mean, that's a really broad question. I'm trying to answer it extremely honest.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to use my personal life in that. I feel majority of, and I'm not dissing it away from me, I can get personal if that's fine, but I feel that majority of people are working for a paycheck, not working out of their passion. They don't care to flip the switch. You know what I mean?
So then
they're just there to do work, to trade money for work.
So do you then have that thought and that feeling guide you in the principles of how you actually do your job?
See, that's a great question. That's a great question. I would have, then I would have to say, well, what are those principles?
That's precisely correct.
Because I don't know, because I'm just trading time for money.
Well, Tartle has its own principles for how we see it benefiting the world.
Mm-hmm.
So do your principles for how you lead your life align with where this company is trying to help lead the world?
I would think majority of people would have to say no.
Right. So then you need to afford yourself the time to think about the actions and the context within what you do for work and how you live your life, and see if it actually aligns with where the vision and the end goal of this company is headed. Because it will head there without you, and will head there with you. But that choice is yours at the end of the day to flip that switch.
So I see exactly.
You.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're doing. I don't want to get into the guide part yet because I want to stay here. So now, because what you've just done is shifted the responsibility to me to look deep within inside myself and understand what my values and principles are in the work that I'm doing.
Correct.
And so now I have a choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to take the time? Am I just going to trade work for money, and I continue to do that? Have my expertise as with Tartle as a chief marketing officer, and just do that.
Yep.
And it's okay. You need marketing. Okay, perfect. I have this budget. Okay, perfect. You want this ROI. Okay, perfect. I just fit all the puzzle pieces into what you want, but I'm still not bought in. I don't know the philosophies for myself personally, and if I'm doing the work and everything's getting done right, and I'm exchanging money for time, do you see where I'm going here?
Mm-hmm.
Then why does that question even have to come up? I'm doing what you're expecting. I'm doing what the company needs to be done. That's where the pushback would be. You know what I mean? I think that's where the shallowness, playing in the kiddie pool, gets, and not wanting to go swim in the big pool.
What needs to be done in your mind is not for the greater good of what has to be done for the company. Does that make sense? You can do your job in its absolute limitation. But when you came to us and you said that this is a responsibility you want to take on, you're not taking on the full responsibility of what it means to align with the work here. You have aligned with your paycheck, and you have aligned with how you perceive the value of your time. You have not aligned with the value of what this company is trying to do for the rest of the world.
So let's use this in real world, because this is great analogy. So let's say two parties or two people, partners, have agreed to have a monogamous relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You can approach that two different ways. You can say, I love this person so much, and I want to be truthful with this person, that I choose not to, even though this other person, other human, is texting me and flirting with me. I know where this road's going to go. So I choose, because I love them so much, and it misaligns with my values and principles, that I'm not going to do this. Or I can turn around and say, I don't want to do this because I don't want to get caught, or I don't want to do this because I'm married, and I did a contract. Do you see what I'm saying?
One of those says there is an external force that defines my moral and personal obligations. The other one says I have responsibility over my internal forces and processes, so that I am obliged to my own evolution and feeling and definition of those morals and processes. One is my responsibility, and one is saying that somebody else defines the responsibility for me.
Because for socially constructed view, I don't want to look bad.
Correct. And
my belief system
of what looks good and what looks bad is a function of your belief, not a function of the truth of what is actually occurring.
Because I've heard this all the time. Well, we're married because, we pretty much, I love her, but we're pretty much just married for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hear that. So there's an obligation to your children, which they know the bullshit. I mean, they're humans. It's an obligation with you creating humans that you feel like there's no love there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Almost. It seems like, there may be love, but it's not.
You've turned it into a job and a paycheck.
Yes, exactly.
Now I'm just here to raise these things and send them on their way. And I'm in this relationship with this person to sustain resources to help these things evolve. Nothing beyond that. Because
what happens in the workplace or in a relationship, because I think they're the same, whenever it becomes sterile like that?
When it becomes sterile, it lacks the understanding and the amount of adaptation and creativity that others can bring. You start to define your work in a rigid mindset. And then from that rigid view, you lose the feeling of what it means to work and live with purpose.
Can we use two words?
Go ahead.
Joy and peace?
Sure.
Because
you find joy in finding that peace.
Right. You lose those, I think.
Yeah, of course you're going to lose those, because the world is then just some material, chaotic mess, and you're just trying to control something to drive resources from point A to point B. You weren't here to say that, let's evolve this, let's evolve myself, and let me find joy and peace in knowing that when I die on my deathbed, that this is the work I put in to this company to truly better the lives of humanity or better the lives of my children.
But if you're trading time for money, and the corporation is all about money, and your view is all about money,
well, then you found the right corporation.
But I mean, do you see what I'm saying though? That it's got reduced. A lot of corporations, it gets reduced to that.
That's all it's reduced to.
And then people are living their whole life for a payout or a big paycheck, or
it's like going to school. I'm going to define myself by the grades I get or my GPA. No two-dimensional.
Yeah, you hear that all the time. Being a Harvard graduate or being a Stanford graduate.
That's a two-dimensional definition of what you're saying a human being is. If you want to live in that two-dimensional world and miss a whole other dimension of life, be my guest. But you'll never find that light switch. You will never ask your leaders for guidance. They will never afford it to you properly. And you'll find that this life has been wasted in search of material items and a lack of love, joy, peace, and understanding that is truly there to help you evolve at a more direct and accelerated rate than you will find just through increasing your pay every couple of years.
So what if I'm a person out there and I'm listening to this and I want to I want to display love and light. I want to display these creational principles in my leadership. How do you make that? How as a leader, that leadership light that I need to go flip the switch? How do I do that as a leader? How do I go to that? How do I go to that button?
Before you begin to lead others, you need to learn how to lead yourself properly in your actions. And that would require time, attention, and a deep knowingness of who you are.
That's so good.
So before you consider the aspects of what it means to lead, you need to understand yourself and then accept yourself. And then from that, you can afford that learning and its catalyst and experience to others in a Socratic method to apply those metaphors of learning to them to help them evolve on their own time and accord. Like
somebody that is cheating a system all the time, or cheats on their partner, or they have these biases or beliefs, or they feel like they can get away with something. They're going to bring that to their leadership. If there's a and I don't know how you would say this. I'm going to say it this way: a character flaw or something that they haven't led themselves properly in, that's going to be displayed in their work, right?
Yes.
Does it carry over?
Well, yeah, they're naturally self-filtering. It always carries over. Thoughts precede all. And if you're so worried about the way something looks in your belief system, well, then you're also going to be worried about how you look in relation to that belief. You're distorting life both ways, internally and externally. So before you go to become a leader,
right?
Before you go to work at a company, not as a leader, you need to understand yourself first, and you will naturally shine. Your work will become incredibly beneficial to you, the corporation, everybody that interacts with it, because you know yourself deeply. You know your alignment with the tool you're working with deeply, and you know very deeply the effects of that tool for the greater good. And through knowing yourself, you would always prevent the choice of going to work for somebody that leads people through fear.
So you're telling me the greatest thing that I can do to be a great leader is spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically work on myself first.
It's the only thing you can do first. Because everything else is like putting a Band-Aid on it.
So if I'm obese, eating fast food, physically, I'm cheating the system. I'm not there. If I'm mentally can't hold a relationship because I'm cheating on them all the time, because I can't handle the apple that's put in front of me, snake with the apple. You see what I'm saying?
You will lead your relationships into a bifurcation, a splitting. You will lead your health into a poor state. You will lead yourself through your thoughts where you want to go.
lead yourself through your thoughts.
Yes. And so you have to understand yourself, how you think, and what is truly beneficial to your evolution to become that leader for yourself.
Okay, so I want to get into this part. Man, I have so many fucking questions.
We might have to come back for a part 2.
How many minutes are we at?
30.
Oh, shit.
We'll be right back.